Hello and welcome to another episode of the Customers Who Click podcast. Today I have the pleasure of chatting with Parry Malm, CEO and co-founder of Phrasee. Phrasee is an awesome AI-powered copywriting tool, useful for email subject lines, push notifications, landing pages, and even direct mail. Phrasee was recognized by CB Insights as 2017's most innovative AI company, while Parry himself was Tech Entrepreneur of the Year at the 2016 UK Business Awards, and has even spoken in the Houses of Parliament about how the UK can become a global leader in artificial intelligence. Testing copy, and in particular subject lines, is so important for a business. You go to a huge effort building an email list, designing some beautiful creative, but then your subject lines suck, and so no one opens them. The problem with testing subject lines, though, is that not only can it be quite time-consuming to come up with what you feel are 5 or maybe 10 noticeably different versions, but you'll always have the bias of the person who's written them. You know, they like to put numbers in the subject line, or they have a preference for certain words or sentence structures. AI takes away this problem as it doesn't have that bias. So it can generate 10 or 20 subject lines that are in line with your brand guidelines, but still have that broad range of variety, which will really help you determine what works best and even highlight new ideas that maybe you'd rejected in the past. Emojis comes to mind here. A lot of the companies I've worked with, the brand teams have been really strongly against subject lines. But actually, when tests have been performed, emojis and subject lines have worked. But anyway, you're not here to listen to me waffle on. So let's get Parry on to talk about the world of artificial intelligence in marketing. Hi, Parry. Welcome to the Customers Who Click podcast. If you could tell us a bit about yourself, a bit of your background, and why do you do what you do?
Thanks. Yeah. So I'm Parry. I'm one of the founders and the chief executive of Phrasee, and Phrasee is AI-powered copywriting. But I'm not going to do a big shameless pitch and stuff because nobody really cares about that. You can go to my website and figure out more about what Phrasee does. I think the question, why do I do what I do, is quite interesting. So back in the day before I started Phrasee, I was a brand side marketer for a number of years. And I would send out millions of emails and spend thousands of dollars on Google ads, Facebook ads. And I would always try out a whole bunch of different versions, and I'd split test and multivariate test different types of language to see what would stick. And, there's invariably always one that would work really well. So I looked around the market and there is no technology out there that could help you write better language. There's loads of, humans who would say, trust my advice. These Don Draper's types, sitting in their fancy corner offices on Madison Avenue with their pointy tipped shoes and 3-piece tailored suits and that. But it's that's not really helpful because what if there's a better way to do it that doesn't rely upon some oracle of knowledge? What if there's a way to actually apply the same level of scientific rigor to language that we do to every other part of the marketing mix? So that's why I launched Phrasee, because I believed that with the available technology at our fingertips these days, was just a huge opportunity to apply it to the domain of language, of marketing language specifically. And it was an area that nobody else was looking at, which I thought was crazy. Fast forward 5 years, we're a multi-million-pound business with name brand accounts. And I can pretty much guarantee anybody listening to this podcast has gotten an email or gotten a push message or been served a Facebook ad with language that's been written by Phrasee's technology without knowing it.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I can imagine I probably have. I've seen your client list or a bit of it. So definitely have received some myself. You make a really good point. No matter who you work with, whether they're an external third party, a consultant, an agency, or someone you bring in-house, they're always going to have those little biases and their own styles of writing and their own opinions on what really works. But if you've got a tool that just kind of takes in all the data, takes in your brand guidelines and things, and then just tells you what you should do, you don't really have that worry. You kind of, it's data backed, and that should be what works.
Well, exactly, dude. The old way of working was this, where you would have an email going out, let's say 50% off shoes, and you would send a brief to a copywriter, and the copywriter would then, write a couple of subject lines, this, that, and the other. They then send them back to you, and you would, judge them, and you would put in your 2 cents over what you think you should say. You then show it to your coworker, and they'd put in their 2 cents about what they think you should say. You then show it to your boss, and they'd put in their 2 cents about what they think you should say. And the end result, the one you go with, is not the one with the highest probability of success. It's the one that was favored by the most persuasive person in the organization. Now, the problem with that is you're trusting somebody's gut, or you're trusting somebody's sort of role in the corporate hierarchy with no actual data to back things up. So that's the old way. The new way of working is actually much smarter. Instead of briefing a human, you brief Phrasee, and then Phrasee writes the stuff, and then using like technology that can spot linguistic patterns hidden to the human eye and devoid of the biases you were talking about, can then say you should use this language and not that language, which results in a bias-free access, like a democratized and bias-free access to marketing language that doesn't rely upon the old way of thinking, the old Don Draper dinosaurs who sort of used to dictate how you would say things.
Yeah, exactly. And I've seen what it does. I've used it myself. So I've seen the 10, 20 subject lines that Phrasee will spit out for every campaign, and you do get a wide, a decent variety of options there. So you can see that there's no real bias there. Some people would go, we've always got to say 50% off in the title, in the subject line, whereas another person would say, well, no, let's just hint at it. Let's say there's a massive discount available, open this email. And then Phrasee kind of gives you all the different options and the in-betweens, and then tells you what's worked.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And like the important thing there is like humans, like it's a weird thought. Humans are actually like way less creative than we actually give ourselves credit for. Right. Um, so like if you give humans a brief to like do a certain thing, then or to write a certain thing, then they'll write a bunch of stuff, but it's only within their sort of constraints in that small little universe of possible language. But the thing is, there are billions of ways of saying the same thing, like 50% off shoes. There's actually like billions of ways of conveying that message. The human brain is not set up to consider the huge sort of combinatorial explosion of possible language variants out there. And that's why like machines are particularly well suited to it, because they can iterate through all of the possible ways of saying the same thing and then filter it down based upon your brand guidelines and business model constraints and stuff, and then predict which ones within that sort of constrained box are going to be best, right? So in a weird way, like humans are super good at being creative with this like big picture sort of ethereal sort of strategic stuff, like this sort of galactic strategy. But when it comes down to the actual sort of machinations of marketing, humans are actually not that creative. If you hear something in the background, I just seem to have activated Siri with my voice. Galactic strategy, but when I comes down. If you want to know what Siri says about that, I can let you know later.
Yes, I mean this probably leads quite well into the next question of so I'm sure you see it all over social media, like LinkedIn, Facebook groups. Kind of every few days, I probably see email is dead. In fact, I've even seen it in emails. People think it doesn't really work anymore. People, it's almost like banner blindness. People have an inbox, they kind of scan through it a little bit, but the actual performance isn't there. I mean, I'm pretty confident email is still great. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it? Where do you see the future of email and generally customer communications and how brands should engage with people off their platforms?
Yeah, I mean, if I had $1 for every time someone said email was dead, I would have at least like $7, and that's a lot of money. Like the simple proof point to prove that email is not dead all of these like coronavirus emails, which every CEO from every company in the world has been sending out. Um, um, just to note to the listeners and stuff, we're taping this like in mid-March, just when all the panic has set in and whatnot. Every single CEO across the world has sent out a message about coronavirus via email. Like, there's one unique power that email has over nearly every other advertising channel, and that's that it's first party owned data. So you think about Facebook ads, Google AdWords, you're ultimately beholden to a third party who controls that data. If you have a message you want to get out on Facebook, your organic reach is pretty much zero, and you have to pay to access that audience that you've already spent money building. With Google, you have to pay a Google tax to get traffic these days, right? Especially as ads fill up more and more of the first page and whatnot. Whereas with email, it is the only digital marketing channel that does not require third parties to actually access. Like, sure, you need an ESP to send stuff out, but that's operational. It's your data. It's your own data. It's completely yours. So that's why actually I think even more so email is becoming more and more important, because as you have these monopolistic actors who control walled gardens of advertising reach, this sort of interoperability, technology agnostic aspect of email means that your email database is the single most valuable marketing asset that your business owns.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, the organic reach of Facebook's is nothing really. Pages are, brands spent years and years working on them and brought in whole teams of people to build up Facebook pages, create their community engagement. And now you've got to pay to actually reach those people. So 2 or 3 years worth of work is now kind of almost wasted, because you simply have to pay to reach them anyway. So you might as well just be running ads.
Oh,
Even
dude,
Facebook groups,
totally.
we're seeing the same thing. I know a load of smaller businesses and freelancers and independents who started Facebook groups to build what they felt was more of a community than a page. And even there, I think we're seeing a lot of restriction on reach. And I think, I wouldn't be surprised if ads are on the way for groups as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I don't know like a huge amount about the mechanics of Facebook ads and Google ads and stuff, but I do know a fair amount about economics and how markets function. And when you have monopolistic actors, they will do things in their favor because there's no real option. Like, there's not really a substitute advertising channel for Facebook because Facebook is Facebook. There's not really a substitute for Google because they own the vast majority of search reach out there. So you kind of effectively have to pay a tax to them if you want to market using those channels. With email, there's no tax. You basically have open access to your data. There's no sort of money-based throttling considerations, which you need to bear in mind. And it's your data. You can be transient with it. You can, if you're using one ESP, you can move to a different ESP. You can do what you want with that data. There's no restrictions. So it is the single most sort of democratized marketing channel online, and by virtue of it being this sort of interoperable structure, it's not conceivable that monopolistic actors can actually take over and extract obscene rents from the marketplace, as you're finding with different online advertising channels. But I'll stop ranting right now because I never know who's listening.
Yeah. Would you say that? I mean, do you think that maybe things like GDPR are almost maybe not leveling the playing field there, but almost giving Facebook and Google a bit more of an advantage, because you've got to work harder to get the permission for the data if you want to email or send SMS. Whereas people are still searching on Google, they're still on Facebook, and if you want to reach them, you have to pay.
Yeah, like GDPR, when it first hit, there's a bit of a slowdown, and then things sort of came back up. And I think it's it's one of these things where GDPR should have had much more of an impact on the Googles and the Facebooks, because they collect data, I mean, in many more spurious ways than people sending offers via email. I don't think we quite know what's going to happen with those, because nobody has really um, tested it in court yet. Now, this will have a greater effect, I think, with the CCPA in California, just by virtue of the U.S. being a much more litigious jurisdiction than Europe is. And one of the big boys is going to get tested, and they're either going to need to open their books up and let people know how they're actually how their data is being used and processed, or they're going to have to pay, awfully big fines and whatnot, much bigger than like the 2 billion which the EU dinged them for, which is a drop in the bucket. So like stuff like that, for consumers is broadly a good thing. It just takes time to wash through to see what the net impact of legislation is, because the wheels of justice turn very slowly.
Yeah, I understand. Email is the owned platform. You own the data. You should have more control over it. Do you see companies being creative with how they use Phrasee, or using it for maybe not necessarily marketing purposes? For example, I think obviously a lot of companies send out transactional emails, and I feel that a lot of the time they're seen as emails that the company has to do, and so they do them. Whereas actually, they're the emails that the customer wants to receive. Their order confirmations, delivery statuses, and things like that. So, do you have you seen many companies using Phrasee to improve those kind of transactional emails and performance there, or are there some other use cases people have used it for, or spoken to you about using it for, that maybe you hadn't considered before?
Well, certainly. Like, I mean, we got customers using us across the gamut of marketing, like not just with email, but, across all sorts of different marketing channels and within different email programs and stuff. But I think actually the real impact that Phrasee has beyond, optimizing subject lines and Facebook ads and stuff is the actual like organizational impact it can have. And I've seen this manifest in two ways that I totally didn't expect when I first launched Phrasee. The way number one is fundamentally changing their revenue models. So, like, I mean, I got one great example. We work with a big arts and crafts firm in the U.S., and their MO for years and years was to discount, 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 coupon, coupon, coupon. And their entire business was fueled by sort of deep discounting stuff. When they started working with Phrasee, they were actually quite taken aback that a lot of the language Phrasee was recommended actually veered away from hard discounting and veered more towards, focusing on product benefits and stuff like that. So they're a little bit loath at first, but as the test ran and it ran again and it ran again, Phrasee kept proving out that focusing on hard discount tactics isn't actually what was driving response from customers. It's what the trading team thought customers wanted, but customers vote with their wallets. And they found actually over time that, like, by not offering hard discounts and stuff like that, they were actually revenue neutral, but selling stuff at a much higher margin. So that had a real impact, not just on the CRM function, but wider in the whole business. And they've actually veered away from hard discounting and margin hitting sales, and more towards sort of like value-based sales. And it's had a real impact on their entire commercial function. The second area that Phrasee's had sort of impact, which I didn't expect, was from an organizational standpoint, where people have become very anesthetized towards AI, because every tech company in the world is talking about AI this and AI that, and they'll go and they'll sign $1 million contract and then go like, so let's talk about AI now, and then a project will never really start and never really finish. And the market has become quite disenchanted to it. So what a lot of brands have done is they've bought Phrasee in, because it's like it's a small problem. Like, it's a very small point solution, optimizing subject lines or optimizing push messages or optimizing SMSs. It's a small problem with a big impact that uses real AI, without these sort of like huge complex operational overheads. So what a lot of people have done, the great example here is one of our very first customers, a fellow named Saul Lopez, who worked with us when he was at Virgin Holidays. Now he's moved on to Dixon's Carphone. And at both companies, what he's done is he's brought in Phrasee early doors as a sort of, like immediate impact AI win, which has then freed up more budget for him to invest in these longer, sort of more pervasive AI projects. And the benefit of that is that there's been this entire sort of organizational perceptual change about what AI is, and actually getting people along that journey instead of it being this whole sort of massive, complicated, fear-based project. So those are two impacts that I found really curious throughout the years that I'm pretty proud of.
Yeah, definitely. Especially the arts and crafts one, I think is really interesting. The fact that it's not just that Phrasee has improved their email performance and sales; it's the fact that it's actually got make them go, we need to rethink our whole model here. This is telling us we don't need to be doing the discounting, which is not really growing our business. We can scrap that. We can just give them slightly different content and value-based content, and we're going to make twice the money because we're selling selling the same number of products or maybe slightly more, but we're not giving away that 30-40% discounts every time.
Yeah, well, totally, right. And I think it's this whole concept, like in one of the chapters of the book, chapter 9, I think it is. I juxtapose two different philosophies of advertising: this short-termist philosophy versus a long-termist philosophy. And the short-termist philosophy is exactly that, where it's all sort of discount, short-term metrics, last click attribution management by spreadsheets. We got to hit this quarter's number right now. So let's sell. And what that does is it devolves marketing teams into being nothing more than a virtual double glazing salesman. And people lose trust in brands, and they become very transient, and the whole concept of brand loyalty ceases to exist. This is juxtaposed by this sort of long-termist viewpoint, where it's going, you want to like retain customers for a long period. You want to build up the equity of your brand, and you want to be able to leverage that brand equity into like sustained customers and stuff, right? And what I've really seen is the brands that sort of double down on this, hard discounting, double glazing salesman approach, they just can't keep doing that because they're just hitting their margin, and people become indifferent from their brand to a different brand. Whereas the brands like Virgin Holidays, like Dixon's Carphone, who actually focus on building this brand and like really sort of doubling down on their brand voice and optimizing these sort of, top line engagement metrics, are the ones who are really standing the test of time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm absolutely certain that I've bought things online where I've done a search on Google, I've found the product on a website, and it's been cheaper or there's been a discount or whatever. I've bought it, and I would have no idea what that business is. I could not tell you where I've bought like certain Xbox games or whatever. But there are other websites where I might pay a bit more money, or there's a more custom experience that you kind of start to fall in love with the brand. You really like the idea and the values of that business, and you're happy spending more money because you're getting kind of a good feeling about working with that business and purchasing from that business, as opposed to just the product that you're receiving.
You bet. And this has like real world impacts also. I mean, as we're speaking now, the world is going through an unprecedented economic shutdown, and there's going to be winners and losers as a result of all this coronavirus stuff. And the winners are not going to be those whose budget lines depend upon these sort of short run hard discounting sales, who live from month to month cash flows. It's going to be the businesses who have a long-term strategy who are going to be the winners.
Absolutely. So you mentioned your book just earlier, which we haven't really talked about. So yeah, you've just launched a new book, The Language Effect. Do you want to tell us a bit about that? Yeah, who's it for? Well, just tell us a bit about it, really.
So the book is called The Language Effect: Why AI-Powered Copywriting is a Marketer's New Best Friend. What it effectively is it's the culmination of everything I've learned in the last 5 years of running Phrasee, and then what my vision is, not just for Phrasee, but for marketers of the future. What it effectively does is it outlines the language effect, which is the measurable impact that better language can have on your bottom line. And it interlays this with myriad examples of brands who get it and brands who don't. Now, the language effect is enabled by AI-powered copywriting, which is the category of technology which Phrasee is pioneering. And this is where you use advanced technology to write better copy than humans by themselves. And the book itself, I mean, I think it's a good read. I'm biased. But I'd say that, it's written in a very accessible style, because I certainly realized that that the entire idea of using AI to perform this sort of quintessentially human task, writing language, can be a little bit existentially challenging for some people, but actually it's not. And what Phrasee is doing is it's truly empowering people. It's democratizing access to advanced copywriting techniques, which was previously a walled garden of Don Draper types. So yeah, the book, you can go to the languageeffect.com or just go onto the Phrasee website and you can find it there. And yeah, you should totally buy it because Parry needs to eat.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. I'm definitely going to have to get myself a copy. What are some of the common myths you see about AI, or what are some objections people bring up if when you're talking to new prospects or new clients about how to implement it?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really get objections these days about AI and stuff like that, but I think for the market in general is people have unrealistic expectations for what AI can actually do, or what it's on the verge of doing. There's lots of like stories in mainstream media about AI wrote a friend script, or AI is writing fake news, watch your back. So that's like the technical term for that stuff is bullshit. um the actual sort of like commercial applications of AI are um, very, very small defined point solutions, like optimizing short form advertising copy like Phrasee does. The entire idea about having this sort of sentient marketer where you click a button and your entire marketing campaign is complete is completely off the wall. It's off the wall for a couple of reasons. Reason number one is the technology is nowhere near there yet. You still need humans to guide AI technology. And part of the entire like Phrasee model is to have this sort of like human driven check and balance system at every step of language generation through to distribution. Secondly, we're a couple of huge technical innovations away from unconstrained AI having any commercial applicability whatsoever. And I think people often sort of see the news, or they hear these like fancy whizzy sales pitches from tech companies going like, oh, we've got AI, we're doing this, we're doing that. But when you get down to the guts of it, AI just does a few things. It does a few things really, really, really well. And by virtue of the AI focusing on those few point solutions, it then frees up marketers' time to be better marketers. And that to me is where the real myth about AI is. AI is not necessarily a time saver. What it does is it takes away some of the mundane tasks from your job, so you have more time to focus on important stuff, but you're going to be just as busy focusing on that stuff.
Yeah, so it's very much a supporting technology at the moment. It's not something it's not a plug and play. This will run all your campaigns and make you loads of money sort of thing.
Well, no, and And I would say whether we're talking about AI, automation, what have you, I'm always a little bit skeptical of these sort of turnkey solutions where you set them up and let them run. Perfect example is what it's March the 19th as we're speaking right now, right? So 6 days ago, no, sorry, 7 days ago, the NBA announced the season was going to be suspended, and now we're on a sort of like virtual lockdown in London until further notice, right? Now, there were going to be a lot of people who this time a week ago had all these fantastic marketing automation campaigns set up where you had all your customer journeys and all the experiences sorted and this and that and so forth. And there's probably some forms of AI helping route people in the right direction down that right decision path and whatnot. And then the world now looks completely different from how it was a year ago. And there's not an AI on the planet that could have predicted where we are in just the span of 7 days. And that's the real danger about these sort of set and forget systems, whether it's AI, automation, or somewhere in the middle of that spectrum. Shit happens, and machines cannot predict the unpredictability. And that's why I'm not worried about my son growing up in a world where like AI makes all of the choices, because it's not good at dealing with ambiguity, whereas humans are.
Okay, yeah, that's makes sense. It's interesting. I suppose that kind of leads to the next question: where do you see the future of AI, particularly in marketing?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly learned that like predicting the future is a fool's errand. If we go and look at the predictions from 2010 on the way the world was supposed to be in 2020, barely any of them have come true. No one could have expected, social media to skyrocket to absolute ubiquity. No one could have, you know, like seen all of this stuff happen and whatnot. What I do think will happen though is that people are going to get burned by a lot of profiteers and charlatans, predominantly from the tech industry, selling them AI that doesn't actually provide real value. And people are going to need to start justifying and tracking investment in AI, because there's no sense in having a shiny new toy if that shiny new toy doesn't work. Um, and this is one thing that I really hope for, actually, because one thing that we've always done with Phrasee since day one has been like completely transparent about the impact Phrasee has on bottom lines. We've actually got it baked into our system from day one, where you benchmark what Phrasee does versus what humans do. But not many companies do that, and they're expecting a leap of faith. And I think that the leap of faith was cool for like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years in times of buoyancy. Now that we're going into a period of economic uncertainty, maybe recession, who knows? Justifying every dollar and proving that spend is going to be more and more important, and there's going to be more than a few AI companies who are caught short.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ROI is obviously incredibly important, especially if you're signing off on new technology and new projects. You've got to at least have some, if not an estimate of what it's going to return, an idea of a target that you'd like to see, and an idea of whether that's achievable or not. But I have seen in one or two companies that I've worked with in the past, they've signed off on big projects because it's those things that every business should have. It's like when people were building Facebook pages, and every business went, "We've got to have a Facebook page. We need hundreds of thousands of fans on there." Every business is going, "We need this technology because everyone's saying we should do it." And they kind of get involved in these projects, don't really know what they're going to do with them, and it's just a waste of time and money when you could have been working on something that's ROI positive and generating revenue.
You bet, man. You bet.
Cool. So, do you have any pet peeves when it comes to marketing or email marketing in particular?
Yeah, so I first got into marketing and studied it in uni and took it on as a career because I thought that there was, this really interesting ambiguous sort of social science element through it. I mean, I'm a computer scientist slash linguist slash math slash marketing guy. But one thing I've always liked about marketing is that it's perfectly imperfect. You've got all these sort of spreadsheets and models and stuff, but then human beings, the way that they act, the way that they buy stuff is very unpredictable, and it's really interesting. But I think in the last 10 years, marketing has become ruled by spreadsheets, and it's become sort of not very fun. Like when I started doing marketing, it was fun because you got to experiment, you got to try new stuff. You got to be creative. And now the majority of marketers spend most of their days in software platforms, like executing kind of boring jobs and stuff, or managing spreadsheets. And that's my biggest pet peeve, because there's a lot of marketers out there who are incredibly bright, incredibly creative, incredibly like willing to take chances and take risks and stick their necks out for it, but they're being beaten down by spreadsheet wonks who just want to see what the impact of changing their bid on a Google AdWord by 50 cents is. So that's my biggest pet peeve. But I think we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, because people are starting to realize that managing by spreadsheet is a short-termist tactic. And if you manage by spreadsheet, then you're going to be a double glazing salesman, because you get all these short-term sales and you'll reinforce that that's the right way of doing things. But the long-run impact of doing that is that your margins are hit and your customers become transient. So while it's a big pet peeve, I do, from what I'm hearing in the market, from what I'm seeing with our customers, I do believe that the end of the tunnel is coming near, and we're about to enter a golden age of marketing where marketers are allowed to be marketers again.
Okay, yeah. So people who, or companies who are ruled by stats, the data, the Excel spreadsheets, and don't allow the creativity to really come out. And then I guess also, like you mentioned, those trying to get those PPC bid change optimizations done to see what change that has, when that is something you do pretty much every day. Depending on your budgets, you're going to be doing that every day, maybe several times a day, depending on how much you're spending. And it's just the top end. It's the top of the funnel. It's not really a long-term strategy, because if you stop doing that, it stops working. Whereas you want to have that kind of that long-term strategy of how do we give people the best possible experience with a brand that they kind of they want to engage with, they want to trust.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Like there's so many bright people whose time is being wasted by staring at spreadsheets and fiddling with ESPs and Google Ad Manager and all this kind of stuff, and the opportunity cost of having these people focus on boring tasks is access to the most creative part of your entire business. And I think people need to realize what that real tangible opportunity cost is. And in fact, this is one of the themes which I cover in the language effect, where we actually quantify what bad, mundane language is costing you. And for enterprise brands, this runs to the millions by virtue of trying to account for every single dollar at every single moment. You're actually costing yourself money, which is, it's just a counterintuitive truth.
Yeah, exactly. So finally, if you could kill off one marketing channel or tactic that you just really hate, what would it be and why?
Oh man, that's a tough question. I mean,
Or it doesn't have to be one you hate, really. It could just be one that you just want to see gone.
well, I don't need to worry about email because it's already dying, right? I think we covered that as the top of the podcast.
Yeah.
Like I think the tactic that bugs me is that people use tactics in online marketing that they would never use face to face. So like you would never walk up to like someone and put a countdown timer in their face and go, if you don't buy in the next 7 minutes, this deal is gone, and then sit there and wait and watch them sweat while the countdown timer goes down. I just think like we should talk to people like they're people, whether it's online or offline. And that's my biggest pet peeve. It's like high pressure, urgency driven, clickbaity, tacky, race to the bottom marketing, which was the way of the 2010s. But my vision for the 2020s, and what marketers are telling me, what their vision for the 2020s is we're going to let clickbait die the death and stay in the last decade. Whereas this decade, brand is back. And the marketers who understand that and are doubling down on that are the marketers of the future and the marketers who are going to lead this industry forward.
Absolutely, and it's kind of what you mentioned earlier with the art and crafts business. It's not about these short-term tactics that kind of almost force people to click and manipulate people to click and make that purchase really quickly. It's about building that relationship, giving people a great experience, so that not only do they want to make that purchase with you, but they're actually going to come back to you again because they think, oh, that was really good business. Really like the product, or I had a really good customer support experience. And when they want to buy a similar product or another product in that kind of category, your brand is the one that comes to mind first.
Most def, dude. Absolutely.
Brilliant. Well, I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. Really interesting stuff.
Right on, my dude. Thanks for having me.
So, don't expect AI to significantly change your life, but it's definitely worth considering as it can still have huge benefits for your business. It's a bit of a supporting tool right now in that the value of AI is that it frees up marketers from the tasks that are a bit of a time drain and that we're not actually very good at and we're great at, and allow us to focus on things that we are great at. And the big part here is that, as mentioned in the podcast, AI removes the bias, not only from the copywriter, but also within the wider team as well. Quite often copy will go back and forth between copywriters and the email team, and an individual then generally decides which one or two subject lines to test. So it kind of becomes a case of who's the most influential person in a team, who can argue their case best. With the billions of possible variations in a subject line, the different ways you can present an offer or a product, as humans, we just can't possibly come up with a strong set of options that gives us a broad variety there. We're limited to a certain way of thinking. So as individuals, we'll always come out with a very small group of variations ourselves. But also, it can help you understand your business better and your customers' motivation better. Any business that is focusing its marketing efforts around discounting is always going to struggle. It's not going to build a loyal customer base. And without a loyal customer base, your revenue is dependent on the discounts. So you end up in this spiral to the bottom. Using AI can help you very quickly determine which messages resonate with your customers best. And that can then feed back into other areas of business, including acquisition and customer service. As for emails itself, we're pretty confident it is and will continue to be the dominant and best way to market to your audience. If you're building an engaged and quality customer base, you're also building a large, valuable email database as well, which only the customer themselves can take away from you. If you treat that email list with respect, it's going to continue to generate huge amounts of revenue for you at an amazing ROI. That's all for today. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe for future episodes. And if you've got any questions about AI and language and marketing, please ping over to will@customerswhoclick.com. Don't forget to head over to the languageeffect.com to check out Parry's book, and you can download the first 3 chapters there for free. In the next episode of Customers Who Click, I'll be speaking with Nick Rigby, the CEO of Yodel Mobile, one of the best mobile growth agencies around. We'll be discussing the mobile customer journey and key things to bear in mind when launching an app. But until then, keep your customers clicking.